Okay, we will continue with problem 5-14A. At this point, you should have gone line by line from your trial balance and adjustment columns to come up with the balances here in your adjusted trial balance. So these were the numbers that you got from extending each line. So take a second, pause the video, double check all of your balances. If you do not have this balance, then look back and see why yours does not match. Your adjusted trial balance must balance. You must total the adjustment debit column, and you must total the adjustment credit column, and they must equal, or you do not go any further. Okay, so just to review what we've done so far, step 1 was preparing the trial balance, which was already done for us in this problem. Step 2 of the worksheet was to enter the adjustments in the adjustments column. Step 3 is what we did here when we extended to the adjusted trial balance. Once your adjusted trial balance balances, then you're ready to move to step 4 of the worksheet. And step 4 simply says extend each account to either the income statement or the balance sheet. So you're extending to either the income statement or the balance sheet columns. You are not extending to both. Each account is going to go to one or the other. If you can remember from previous chapters, what type of accounts belong on the income statement? Revenues and expenses. So if you can remember that, then you can remember that everything else belongs on the balance sheet. Your assets, liabilities, capital, and drawing are going to be extended to the balance sheet. So we'll go line by line and do this. So our first line is cash, and I'm sorry that I can't show you both sides of this worksheet, but if you follow over on your worksheet from the previous page, you would see that this line is, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. This line is cash, and cash belongs on the balance sheet. So follow over to the balance sheet. Of course, this is a debit balance, so you're going to follow over to the balance sheet debit column and enter that balance. Okay, and then our next line is accounts receivable. So we'll follow over on the accounts receivable line. That's an asset. It's going on the balance sheet. So we'll follow over and enter the accounts receivable balance of $940 debit. Okay, and then we'll move to the next line. This is your supplies line. So the balance on the adjusted trial balance is $90. We are bringing forward all of the balances on the adjusted trial balance. We're not looking back over at those other sets of columns anymore. We are just worried or concerned with the balances on the adjusted trial balance. So the balance on the adjusted trial balance for supplies is a $90 debit. So we will follow over and enter the $90 debit in the balance sheet debit column. The next line is prepaid insurance. Prepaid insurance has a $550 debit balance on the adjusted trial balance. So we're going to follow over and enter that $550 debit balance in the balance sheet debit column. Then we will extend delivery equipment, had a $6,400 debit balance. Our next account is accumulated depreciation delivery equipment. Accumulated depreciation delivery equipment has a $600 credit balance. So we are going to follow over to the balance sheet credit column to enter this balance. So $600 credit for accumulated depreciation. The next account is accounts payable. It has a $1,220 credit balance on the adjusted trial balance. So we're going to copy that over in the balance sheet credit column. The next item is wages payable. And on the adjusted trial balance, it has a $350 credit balance. So we will enter that in the balance sheet credit column. The next account is Jill Mason Capital is correct. So Jill Mason Capital has an $8,000 credit balance. So we will extend that to the balance sheet credit column. And then the next account is Jill Mason Drawing. Jill Mason Drawing has a $1,400 debit balance. That will be extended to the balance sheet debit column. Okay, so on our balance sheet, we have our assets, liabilities, capital, and drawing. The next account in your worksheet is delivery fees. Delivery fees is a revenue. Revenues belong on the income statement, so we will extend delivery fees balance to the income statement. So looking at our worksheet, delivery fees has a $6,200 credit balance on the adjusted trial balance. So we are going to extend that $6,200 credit balance to the income statement credit column. The rest of your accounts, the remainder of your accounts, beginning with wages expense and on down through delivery expense, all of those accounts are expenses. Expenses all have debit balances, and expenses belong on the income statement. So all of these expenses will go to the income statement debit column. So you simply need to copy those balances from the adjusted trial balance to the income statement debit columns. When you're working this on paper, you need to be careful. I suggest using a ruler or a scratch piece of paper to make sure that you are staying on the correct line. A lot of times students will accidentally move it up or down a line, and that makes them skip one of the balances, and you'll end up with a mess. But that is step 4 in completing the worksheet. Step 4 in completing the worksheet is to extend each account to either the income statement or the balance sheet. There's no totaling involved in step 4. This is it. Then, once every line is extended to the proper column, step 5 is to complete the worksheet. So in step 5, we are going to total these columns. So we'll start with the income statement debit and credit columns. We'll start there. So step 5 says total or complete the worksheet. So the first step in completing the worksheet is to total these columns. So you're going to add your income statement debit column, and you will get $5,390. And then you add your income statement credit column, and you will get $6,200. They will not equal. So what you do is you take the difference between the two totals. So the difference between $6,200 and 5,390. Take the difference between those two numbers. The difference here is $810. You add that difference to the column with the smaller total. So this is smaller than the 6,200. So we're going to take our $810 difference and add it to the smaller column. All right, then we'll rule and we will add. So 5,390 plus 810 gives us 6,200. Then we add this side, 6,200 plus 0. We're going to bring down the 6,200. And now the columns balance. And so when they balance, we will double rule. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing for the balance sheet columns. We are going to total the columns. So we'll total the balance sheet. That's going to drive me crazy. Let's fix this. We're going to total the balance sheet debit column, and we will get 10,980. Then we will total the balance sheet credit columns, and for this problem, we're going to get 10,170. Just as with the income statement columns, they will not balance. So you will take the difference between the two, the difference between the 10,980 and 10,170. The difference is 810. You add that difference to the side with the smaller total. So 10,170 is less than 10,980, so we're going to add the 810. And then we will total our columns. So 10,980, we simply bring it down. 10,170 plus 810 equals 10,980. And now these two columns balance, so we will double rule. Now let's talk about the difference that we calculated. On the income statement columns, we calculated a difference of 810. On the balance sheet columns, we calculated a difference of 810. That is not a coincidence. The differences that you calculate must be exactly the same. These differences represent the income or the loss that the business had for the accounting period. If you will look back in your textbook to page 147, it talks about these differences. If these differences end up apart, meaning they end up here and here, then that represents a net income. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because what is in your income statement credit column? That's your revenues, isn't it? Revenues. What's in your income statement debit columns? Those are expenses. So when you get these totals here, this was your total revenue, this was your total expenses. So if revenues were greater than expenses, here's your difference. So if the differences are apart, as they are here, it represents a net income. If the differences end up in these two columns, then you have a net loss. That's the only way it can be. You cannot end up with a difference here, here, and here. You can't end up with differences in those columns. Just like you cannot end up with a difference in this column and this column. That's not possible. So you're either going to have the differences together, as we do here. They're together. And that is going to be a net loss. And in this problem, and as in this problem, if they end here and here apart, it's a net income. Now on the same line as the differences, so these differences are on line 22. Do you see that? You follow across on line 22 all the way back over to the account title column, and you indicate what that difference represents. So here in the account title column on line 22, you need to write net income. If the differences had ended up together, we would follow across on that line and write net loss. And that is the worksheet for problem 5-14A. Please email me or message me if you have any questions on this problem.